When I was asked to write an essay for the catalog, I was asked to write about the link between food in the United States and food in the Congo region. And I ended up writing about peanuts. So for this talk, I thought that I would enlarge the subject and maybe talk about other foods, but that was not as simple as I thought it would be. So as you may know, African American cuisine is more than just the African heritage. It's actually a combination of culinary traditions from Europe, from Native Americans, and of course also Africa. But it's more than that. It's also about what I term survival foods, so foods that were simply available to slaves. For instance, parts of the pigs that that plantation owners did not want to eat themselves, but it was also about animals that were hunted or trapped in the wild and vegetables that were gathered. So the African heritage is just a small portion of African American food. Another thing is that when you have a look at food and culinary traditions, it's very hard to actually link these to one specific ethnic group, as was the point of this exhibition and catalog. For instance, you have these rice and bean dishes like hop and john, jambalaya, that are linked to rice and bean dishes in West Africa, but of course West Africa is huge, and you cannot claim it's linked to this or that ethnic group. Also, some foodstuffs that are actually that are African in origins, like watermelons and sesame, have probably been introduced by Europeans, because Europeans knew about them already. Linguistics is one way to provide a more specific link with certain ethnic groups or regions, and still, even linguistics can remain kind of vague. A well-known example is the word for okra, which is gumbo, and you can read in many books and articles that gumbo stems from a Bantu word. But of course, Bantu languages are spoken all over Central and Southern Africa, so that's not quite specific either. Now, I had a look at this verse myself, and I found out that it's not Bantu. It's actually, the region is more restricted. It's more of West Central Africa, actually. Interesting thing here is that in most Kongo language varieties, actually the word for okra is dongo dongo, and not gombo, although I did find the word gombo in one source. So same is true for the word for sesame, bene, which is also found in large parts of West Africa. So again, you cannot see a link with one or the other ethnic group. But sometimes you can, and actually there are many Congo foodstuffs and preparations that did cross the ocean. But if you use linguistics as a tool, well, sometimes you can simply not distinguish between Kimbundu words and Kikongo words, because, well, both languages are related, and they very often have the same words. An example in point is wangila for sesame, which you find in, for instance, in Jamaican English and in French-based Creole. And well, you find wangila both in Kikongo and Kimbundu. Same is true for fungi, actually. You also find it both in Kikongo and Kimbundu. The word wando for pigeon pea, on the other hand, is clearly Kikongo. Oh, I'm sorry, that should have been more to the top. But the word for pigeon pea in Kimbundu is actually Kizonji. So here you can actually claim, okay, it was slaves of Congo origin that introduced this plant. Or at least it's linked to the Congo region. So, but we are interested here in the United States and food in the United States. And so I was looking for other linguistic links, and actually, well, I didn't find any but peanuts. So I end up talking about peanuts again, I'm afraid. And as you may know, so the words for peanuts in the southern United States are pinder or goober, and you will find in all the literature that these are words of Kongo origin, and I'm not here to dispute that, but I want to offer some more information on that. Actually, the whole story about peanuts is well known, and well, there's an entire book that has been dedicated to the history of peanuts, and especially peanuts, history of peanuts in the United States. So I want to focus on some parts of the history that were not that well studied, so I will actually talk more about Central Africa. So what happens to peanuts in the Congo region? As you may know, peanuts are not African in origin. They are descend from Central and Southern America. They were introduced in the Congo region, but what happened there? And also, since I'm a linguist, I want to know more about the words pinder and goober. All right, just very briefly, the first archaeobotanical finds for peanuts stem from Peru. So they were found, so they date to 7,600 years ago. And actually peanuts were cultivated all over Central and Southern America before Europeans arrived. Earliest description is 16th century. And in Africa there is a plant that is quite similar to peanuts. It's the Bambara groundnut, which is also part of the bean family, and which also grows its legumes underground. It's a Bambara groundnut. And it was also brought to the Americas. So in the 17th century, you find the Bambara groundnut already in Brazil. Then peanuts got to sub-Saharan Africa, so it's more towards the end of the 17th century. You find this date. Well, I found it. This is on. I took all these dates from a blog called The Polyglot Vegetarian, which turned out to be very informative. It was very precise. So, anyway, and then it was brought to the Americas. End of the 17th century, you find it in Jamaica, and then in Suriname. So it was found amongst slave populations. And of course, peanuts were also introduced in Asia. Probably there are these dates of the 18th century, probably earlier, and there are people that claim that peanuts were long before that, but we'll get into it. All right, so here are some Amerindian names, just so you can compare with the Congo words pinder and goober. It's very different, as you may see, but some of these Amerindian names also ended up in European languages. For instance, the French cacahuète stems from an Nahuatl word, and also the Portuguese, I don't speak Portuguese, so it's amendoim or something. It would be related to the words found in Brazilian languages like mandubi, mandui, etc. So then these are all Congo languages, and when I will be talking about the Congo region, then I don't mean just the Congo kingdom, but the region where all Congo language varieties are spoken. So that's also the region just north of the Congo River, and also the coastal kingdoms of Luango, Kakongo, and Ngoyo. So you have two terms in Congo languages. You have languages that are spoken in what used to be the Congo kingdom, and just north of the river they have Nguba, and then the language spoken in the coastal kingdoms, they have the Pina words. All right, and these two then were brought to the United States as well as Jamaica and Suriname. Okay, so knowledge has been written about peanuts in Central Africa. Actually, in the book written by Smith, I think he dedicates 2 or 3 pages about on peanuts in Central Africa. There's an article of Obanga on culinary traditions in the Congo Kingdom, and it's only there's only 1 paragraph about peanuts, and he only cites 2 sources. And then there's Randall citing Kavazi and oral traditions that say that peanuts were introduced in Rwanda by Europeans. And there's this interesting, there's also a paragraph in a book by Kleeman who claims that Pina would be a loan from Amerindian languages, but you just saw that that's quite improbable. And then who also just says briefly something about Nguba. Anyway, let's have a look at the historical documents. And actually, the first document that says something about groundnuts or legumes that are that grow underneath the earth is from 1610. So it's quite vague, so we cannot know whether it's groundnuts or Bambara groundnuts or peanuts. Then there is this lemma in a dictionary of 17th century, and I'm sorry to say that this is a different citation than the one you will find in the essay. I cited the wrong lemma. I was perhaps too eager to find the word, but this is the right lemma. So here you find the word Nguba, but it's not translated, but it's in the lemma for roasting. So it's actually an example of what you can roast. So you can roast these Nguba. And actually roasting is one of the most popular cooking techniques applied to peanuts nowadays. Then Doppel also mentions what he calls Gaba, strangely enough for the Luango coast, but then Doppel cites actually other sources, so that may be a mix-up. This, I think, is the first source that makes a difference between two types of groundnuts. So De Cadornega talks about Ngubas next to the amendoles. So he used these Portuguese words as opposed to Nguba. Also, Merolia makes a difference between two types of peanuts and then groundnuts, and then also talks about it's written Nguba Zampuni, and we can wonder whether that E should not be C like it's written in other sources. And then it would mean something like the fake groundnut. And it's probably about another plant that produces nuts. Here again we find the Nguba, and we also find then it's written Nguba Zamputo, which probably is refers to an introduced plant. Then actually I should talk to botanists, because it's interesting to look at the descriptions of the plants and whether or not. I think that in this case, Nguba, if you look at the description, it rather refers to peanuts than to groundnuts, but again, I should talk to botanists to be sure. And then most of what I mentioned is about what happened in the Kongo Kingdom. From the 18th century onwards, you find descriptions of peanuts or groundnuts in Kongo. And you find the first instances of pina, so that's in a dictionary for Kongo, and it's translated always in French as pistache. So obviously they were not talking about the real pistache, but it was French word that was used for peanuts in that time. This is again for Kongo Kingdom, also translated as pistache here. And then this is for Kongo again. So they talk about pina being the pistache, and then there is something else that looks like pina. So probably, my guess is that, so in the first section he's talking about peanuts, and then about something that is similar, it's the groundnut. And here again, this is the source, de Grand Pré, who actually says that it's not really correct to call this plant pistache. So what can we know from, I did not go through all the documents, so this is like first survey. So we know that groundnuts are mentioned since 1610, but we do not know what is their botanic identity. So is it the Bambara groundnut or the peanut? But from 1680 onwards, there's a distinction that is being made between groundnuts and peanuts. So we are sure that at that time peanuts were introduced in the Congo region. Now, as to how were peanuts prepared? Well, we know from the dictionary of 1652 that groundnuts were roasted, but we don't know whether it's peanuts or groundnuts. but we are sure that in 1680 peanuts were roasted. Peanut butter and peanut oil may have been mentioned in the source of Meroje, but he talks about milk, so it's not clear what he's referring to. It may be butter, it may be the peanut oil, but maybe it's even something else. But we know for sure that peanut butter and oil were prepared in the 18th century, and we also know that peanuts were conserved by drying. The historical documents also contain some linguistic information, and we'll go into the nouns, into the etymology of the nouns now. First of all, Nguba. The word Nguba is found in the Americas in the 18th century for Jamaica and in the 19th century in the United States. It's found much earlier in the Kongo region, as we just saw from these historical documents. And this is well, it's not a very good map, I confess, but at least you can see. Okay, so this is the Kongo region, and then you find these words follow the Kongo River, and I just put a few dots here because I have the references, but it's probably also in other languages, and you also find it in Kibudu and Nguba. The diffusion is probably partially a loanword diffusion, so the word has been borrowed. And we can see that if we look at sounds correspondences, so just so you know what is sound correspondences, is for instance, if you have the English word stone, well, you have it's regular, it corresponds regularly to Dutch steen, German stein, you have same bone, been, bein, so all that you see, those are regular sound correspondences. And if you have a look at these words, well, they do not correspond. So the languages that are spoken along the Congo River, well, if you would make a reconstruction for these words, that you would have a different reconstruction than for the words found in Kongo or the words found in Kibudu. So from this formal analysis of the words, we know that the word must have been borrowed. One of the theories is always that it was a name for another plant that was applied to the new plant, and indeed the word is used for several other plants, but many of these are actually also introduced plants, and the distribution of the word is quite restricted just to a few languages. The main theory is that Nguba was actually applied to the Bambara groundnut before, and actually the historical documents seem to confirm this theory. So nowadays in Kikongo, the Bambara groundnut is called Nguba Samba or Nguba za Congo, which means the groundnut from Congo. And we see that in historical documents, the Nguba was opposed to the Portuguese amendoim, so amendoim which referred to the peanut. So probably, I think that indeed Nguba is the old name for the Bambara groundnut. There was another hypothesis that it would be the word for kidney, but if you look it up, the word for kidney in the 17th century dictionary, the word for kidney is something very different. So. Anyway, the case of Pina is quite different. So you find, oh dear, sorry. Okay, very quickly, you find the word for Pinda at the end of the 17th century in Jamaica, in the 18th century Suriname, and also USA. The interesting thing is that for the Congo region, it's only later, we only have sources of the 18th century, which does not mean that it was not present. It's perhaps possible that the sources were simply not available. Also, Pina is always mentioned with reference to peanuts and never to Bambara groundnuts, but then we do not have that many sources. All right, this is the region where we find related words. So you have three different forms. You have Benda, Penda, and Pina. And this type of distribution, that was not what I was going to do. Anyway, this type of distribution is all languages spoken in the same vicinity, and actually languages that belong to different Bantu subgroups, whereas related languages do not have the word. So this indicates a loan-word distribution, so meaning that the word is probably relatively recent. Also, the formal analysis seems to confirm that at least partially it is a loan-word series. So was the etymology. I looked at some other plants that carry the same name. Also the Bambara groundnut, for instance, but actually in many languages of the same area, the word for Bambara groundnut is something very different. For instance, in Vili and Bona, which are related to Kongo language varieties, they have words like Ju, which is an old Bantu word. Also, all these forms are Benda, and they cannot actually explain why we have Pinda in Kongo varieties. So I don't think that's the link. Another plant that carries the same name is this one, which is called fake peanut in French. But it does not grow legumes underground. But there is a resemblance in leaves, and it's actually used for medicinal purposes. So that's one possibility that it stems from this plant, but I think it's just strange because peanut has very different uses. Another possibility is that the word pina is a new word that derived from a verb. Verbs like to penetrate the earth, to be deep. You find all kinds of words that are related to something underground or a bottom part of plants, so it might be related to that. Another possibility is, of course, the link with the town Pina, well, why was if it's linked to Pina, why do we have Benda in northern Gabon, and also why would it be named after the town Pina? What would be the reason behind it? So we have these three possibilities, and I actually think that the theory that it's a new word meaning a plant that grows underground, or that the most important part is the bottom part, I think that's the most convincing theory. Anyway, let me conclude. So as I said, I did not go through all the historical texts, but I think that when you combine these historical texts with historical linguistics, you can actually have new insights into the food history of the Congo region, which is interesting because, well, food studies are a hot topic at this moment, but not many scholars are actually interested in food history of sub-Saharan Africa. And finally, well, my research is actually mostly focused on Central Africa, but for this I had to step out of my comfort zone and look into what happened into the Americas. And actually, I think that when we look at what happened in maroon societies and slave populations, what happened there linguistically and in terms of culinary practice, it may learn us something as well about food history of Central Africa.